It was the dawn of the third age of podcasting, 30 years after the series had launched.
The Babylon Podcast was a dream given form. Its goal, to discuss the place where humans and aliens could work out their differences peacefully.
It's a port of call, home away from home for established fans, newbies, John, Blaine, and guests.
Humans and aliens wrapped in 2,500,000 tons of spinning metal, all alone in the night.
It can be a dangerous place.
Wait, what?
But it's our last, best hope for peace.
This is the story of the last of the Babylon stations.
The year is 2024.
The name of the podcast is
Babylon 5, 30 years later. Hello and welcome to Babylon 5, 30 years later, the podcast where John Wilson and myself, Blaine Dowler, go through every episode of Babylon 5, 30 years after the original release to talk about it. So here we are, John, end of Season 2, The Fall of Night. How are you doing?
End of Season 2. I am great. I am excited to be this far in the show. We have started talking it up online because, the future. And hearing everybody else getting excited to start listening to the podcast just made me realize how far we've come since we started this journey. And it's pretty great. It's a pretty great feeling.
Yes, we are here. So we are actually recording this after the promo came out, but before our first episodes have been released.
Mm-hmm. So the future is starting to become the present. We're hopefully going to start hearing some response from everyone. And yeah, it's exciting. Before we get into this week's episode, though, I had a thought. I have been watching the Star Trek Deep Space Nine and Star Trek Voyager episodes that aired alongside this show as we've gone along here. And I just recently passed the episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine where Dax's previous love interest from years ago and a couple of hosts ago comes to the station. And it occurred to me that episode and the Divided Loyalties episode with the gay relationship between Ivanova and Talia aired a handful of weeks apart, just a couple of weeks apart, which is a very interesting coincidence. Obviously, there's nothing intentional behind that, but just the fact that we have two shows in 1995 dealing with lesbian relationships. And that was an era where you couldn't really do that confidently, And I just thought it might be worth taking a moment to talk about how they handled them differently and maybe pros and cons if we think there are any of them. I know you know Deep Space Nine pretty well. Do you remember the details of Dax's relationship?
It has been a few years since I've seen it, and I think I've only seen that one 2 or 3 times. As I recall, what happened was there was a bit of a taboo in the Trill culture, whereas when you change hosts, you are supposed to cut your social ties and live life anew, which it's ignored in Season 7 of Deep Space Nine, but that's not today's topic. And because of that taboo, Dax and another symbiont who had been in love with other hosts hadn't seen each other. At the time they were together originally, they presented as a heterosexual couple, but the feelings were still there, so now that they both had female hosts, there was still some involvement, including a kiss that led to a lot of angry phone calls and the promotion of one intern, because one of the interns that was handling the phone calls was talking to someone who said that, she didn't want her child seeing this, one woman kissing another woman on TV like this. And the intern asked, would you have been okay with it if Dax had pulled out a phaser and shot the woman? And the mother said yes. At which point the intern said, well, then I think you need to ask yourself who was really ruining your child. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. And yeah, the episode of Deep Space Nine presents a taboo on the relationship that has nothing to do with the genders of the hosts. And it's not it's not like Next Generation did that one androgyny episode that by today's standards so woefully mishandles the concept of, gender and non-binary existence, that sort of thing. this is not a metaphor. This is a straight up gay relationship. It is a non-human gay relationship, but it is there, and there is a kiss, and there is validation of the feelings. And the fact that they're both women is never once brought up, except for possibly some subtext with Kira's eyebrows when she's, talking to Dax about her relationship, but it's never text. And so I think the episode has a lot going for it there. The Babylon 5 episode had human characters, had implied intimacy without actual physical romance on the screen. Neither relationship was able to go forward. Babylon 5 did happen to fall into the trope of kill your gays, which is not a good thing. Well, no, Tali didn't actually die at the end of that. I expected her to, and so my brain partially internalized that she did, but she didn't actually die.
Yeah, the body survived, but the personality we knew is dead.
Right. So I'll strike that whole killing your gays thing. But yeah, I thought it was interesting that these two shows that are so often held in very direct comparison by sheer coincidence addressed a social controversy. What at the time was a social controversy, right? Like one right after the other. I just thought that was really interesting.
It is, and there has been speculation about how coincidental it actually is because of P10's decision to take these last 4 episodes of the season and push it back. Divided Loyalties could have aired in April and aired in October. So there has been speculation that the DS9 people found out that this was coming up and tried to beat them to the punch because, there was 6 months before the B5 episode was going to air, which was enough time for them to plan and put something in production for early in the next season. Again, that's rumor and speculation. I have nothing concrete to back that up. But there is enough of a production lead time that it is possible that it's not purely coincidence.
Okay. So possibly not a coincidence, but we without directly asking people directly involved and getting them to give a candid response, we'll never be able to know.
Yeah, I do know that Ira Steven Behr, who was the showrunner on Deep Space Nine from kind of late season 2 forward, he is a supporter of the whole LGBTQ plus community, and he regrets not doing more to support them on Deep Space Nine. One of the things that he regrets is not asking permission to make it textual instead of subtextual, that Garrick's initial interest in Bashir was sexual. That's the way it was in the minds of those in the writer's room. And if you watch the documentary, What We Left Behind, the people doing the documentary were trying to give them credit for that. And Behr said, no, we can't take credit because we never made a text. Right. And they're like, oh, were you not allowed to? He's like, we never asked. That's why we cannot take credit. We didn't try to push that limit.
Gotcha.
Now, I've also heard that Berman had a rule where they just will not be gay characters on Star Trek while he was in charge, because there were people asking to have homosexual characters on the bridge for the first season of Next Generation, and Gene Roddenberry was in support of that, but got pushback from Paramount.
Right, because that was 1987, which was, as different as 1995 is to now. 1987 was even more different.
Yeah, so I found, while Deep Space Nine handles it fairly well in this one, the fact that the relationship started when they presented as heterosexual, it is a little more of a transsexual allegory, but it doesn't, to me, it's not as supportive. Even as other episodes, there's another episode, I can't remember if it's before or after this one, but John may remember seeing it. There was a female Ferengi who dressed as a male. And
yes, that's season 1.
Okay. Yeah, and she had a crush on Quark.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my favorite moments in terms of supporting this is when Dax was basically saying, yeah, I could tell you're interested in Quark. You should go for it. Who knows what he's going to say? And the Ferengi says, oh God, you think he knows I'm a woman? At which point Dax is shocked and goes, you're a woman? So she thought she was telling a guy to go hit on another guy.
That moment always stood out to me as well, because, but she recommends the relationship and the romance before she realizes that before she realizes that it is a heterosexual romance. To her, that quirk of it didn't even enter her mind.
Yeah, so I think in terms of what happens on screen, that is where Deep Space Nine did it best in terms of text. For the subtext, yes, as we said, there's the Garrick Bashir. That was subtextual. This, it felt like they were trying to go there, but because of the heterosexual origins, to me, it felt more transsexual than homosexual. And one more point to it, Deep Space Nine, they're going to come back to that relationship in a way at some point.
Okay.
I've
seen all of Deep Space Nine once, but I do not remember them coming to that relationship. So I'll be curious to see how that happens.
Yeah, it's not Deep Space Nine that comes back to it. Babylon 5 is going to reference the Ivanova-Talia relationship again.
I see. Okay. I may have misunderstood you then. Okay. Well, yeah. So just a little bit, it's kind of an important, touchstone moment culturally. And, TV had so much to wrestle with in the mid-90s. And, some programs made efforts to fight against the boundaries. And since both of these shows did so in, proximity, I thought it might be worth bringing up. However, we also have a season finale to discuss.
Yes. And, well, it's a season finale. It is the third episode that shows up in the top 10 episodes of the series on the IMDb tracker. It's actually number 9 in the 10 top episodes, according to the IMDb voters.
And it was, I think, second for season 2, right? Or top for season 2?
Actually, it's the third for season 2.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, so this one, okay, I've lost that spreadsheet, but the Long Twilight Struggle and The Coming of Shadows both came out on top of this.
Okay.
So this episode originally aired November 1st, 1995. It is directed by Janet Greek, who directs 12 episodes in total. She also directed Chrysalis and will return to direct more in season 5. We have a few members of the guest cast. I think we'll go through as I'm doing our summary here, because there's a lot going on, but it's in pretty tight parallel lines. So we start off with, things going on the station here, and there's a few things going on. We've got a visit from a couple of ambassadors who really, really want to talk to Sheridan. So they pull him away from an exercise where he's helping train Zeta Squadron in tactics that would help them fight against Centauri, should that be required in the future. And he finds out that the Drazi and Pak'ma'ra have been attacked by the Centauri, who are expanding. When Sheridan calls Londo in to talk about it, Londo does not appreciate the tone Sheridan is taking, but Sheridan is not hearing it. He is upset, going like, basically, what the hell do you think you're doing? You're going to expand this war. You're destabilizing the area. And he claims that, no, we are working to make it more stable. We are creating a buffer zone, which is deliberately the same logic that was used in World War I and World War II, as certain countries were expanding. So they get a visit from a couple people from Earth. So, one is played by Roy Dotrice. He is best known for Hellboy 2: The Golden Army, Amadeus, the TV series Beauty and the Beast as Jacob Wells, or Father Wells, and The Cutting Edge.
And I know him as the voice of the Song of Ice and Fire audiobooks. He narrates that entire series, Game of Thrones and such. So, I've heard the name Roy Dotrice a number of times on Audible.
Yeah, well, here he plays Frederick Lance. So he is the one sent to investigate the Centauri situation.
And it's interesting because we have sort of been led to think the entire time that the Centauri are, the baddies, and that whenever Earth goes into this war, we're going to take a stand against the Centauri. And we'll see how this goes.
Yes, that is very much the view of the people on the front lines here. Unfortunately, that is not necessarily the way it plays out. He brings with him a Mr. Wells. He's played by John Vickery, who we have seen before and will see again in the role of Naroon. But he is coming from the Night Watch ministry. So he's checking on the progress of the Night Watch here on Babylon 5. Now, I say we'll see him again as Naroon. We actually will see him again as Mr. Wells, but not until the Crusade spinoff.
Right. He is very similar in appearance to Kyle MacLachlan, whom we will see a lot more of on Twin Peaks. At first, I thought that's who it was, but the face just isn't quite right. They just do look very similar. I know he was on several episodes of Deep Space Nine, but I cannot place those in my memory right now because I don't think I've rewatched. Yeah, it's towards the end of season 7. They're right at the end of the series. So I've only seen those episodes once, and it's been years ago.
It might also be hard to place him because based on the screen captures, he was a Klingon at the time.
Oh, it says Gul Rusat. It looks like a Cardassian.
Oh. Yeah, that would be a Cardassian. I'm just looking at the photos that they have him on the IMDb, and one of them is as a Klingon. There's also another photo of him on Next Generation in sickbay.
Andros Hagen on the episode Night Terrors. Is Night Terrors the one where... No, that's not the one where Riker goes insane on the play.
No, it's the alien abduction one.
Right. So he's just one of the people. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and his role as Gul Rasad in Deep Space Nine is in the final 3 episodes.
Yeah.
Or 3 of the final episodes. So season 7 episodes 20, 21, 22 out of 26, but they might list it on the IMDb as 25 because it ends with a double length.
Right.
Anyway, yes, we have seen him. He is really good at playing those guys who are charming, but, you're instinctively going, there's something wrong with this person. I don't like this person.
Before you even know why, it's just, yeah.
Yeah, he's figured out how to do with body language. Act like he should be completely trustworthy, and yet set off your instinctive alarm bells to say, I shouldn't trust this guy, which is just perfect for the Night Watch head.
This guy's not my friend, and I don't know why, but I do not want to invite him to my birthday party.
Yes. So in any event, as they're here, a few other things take place. First off, Kefir finds out that others have seen what the audience knows are shadow vessels in hyperspace. So a couple have seen them. He only speaks to one of them, who gives him enough information to find this thing. Although the other guy is saying, yeah, that's a bad idea. It's just going to lead to death. Mm-hmm. But Kefir knows the neutrino signature to look for. So kudos on the technology to detect neutrinos with something that small. When we are detecting them here, we're actually, the Sudbury Neutrino Observatory is observing the sun by measuring neutrinos with a vat of cleaning fluid large enough that when they need to do maintenance on it, they put 6 men in an inflatable raft who then would take half an hour to sail over to the other side to work on it. And they compare how many neutrinos they detect at midnight versus noon when they're using the Earth as their buffer. Neutrinos are not easy to detect or to stop.
Well, evidently not for you, but for these guys.
Yeah. I mean, alpha rays can be stopped with a piece of paper. Beta rays don't get through your skin. 10 centimeters of lead will stop a gamma ray. If you want the same odds of stopping a neutrino, you need about 6 light years of lead. So, it's significant. But anyway, I digress. So, Kefir now knows how to detect these things. As we are going through this, a Narn warcruiser that managed to survive so far since the occupation shows up behind the planet about which Babylon 5 is orbiting, asking for sanctuary, and Sheridan grants it according to regulations and his personal moral code.
Mm-hmm. They need help. He's, of course, going to give them help.
Yes.
Also, we like the Narns now.
Yeah, exactly. Providing them with the support that they need to get back out there and protect their world against the occupying forces. So while they are on the station, we have Mr. Lance who's doing his investigation, and we ultimately learn, he's asked to work within certain parameters. He talks to pretty much everyone but G'Kar. Even though G'Kar is not officially an ambassador anymore, there are still people who will hear what he has to say. But Mr. Lance, when he finds out who he is, he suddenly becomes very, very busy and can't talk to him right now.
And that's in the context of we've been waiting to hear Earth's stance on the conflict. G'Kar, back when he was ambassador and he was struggling to find support, the fact that Earth would not take an active stance was frustrating, but he just assumed that they would at some point, and so he wanted to go talk to the guys.
Yep. Yes, so it was a fairly innocent meeting, but Lance did not react well, and we shortly learned that's because Rience was there to broker a peace treaty or a non-aggression pact between Earth and the Centauri.
The Centauri.
Yes, so guaranteeing peace in our time. So the loving grandfather is doing what he thinks is best to protect his grandchildren. So much to the disappointment of the command staff on Babylon 5.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Mr. Wells has a couple of important meetings while he's here. One, he tries to recruit Ivanova to the Night Watch, who tells him exactly where to go and how uncomfortable he should be on the way. Yes, she is not having the Night Watch. He then actually has a General Night Watch meeting, at which point he calls out Zach Allen in front of everybody else for not having things to report where everybody else is finding things to report. And we can see the discomfort. And Zach actually flat out says that he's not comfortable doing some of the things they're asking him to do. Storekeeper's voicing his opinion. Well, he didn't feel that needed to be reported. Mr. Wells thinks it does, so Wells encourages him quite forcefully, using a lot of social pressure, to report or to confirm reports that there is a particular shopkeeper who doesn't like the new trade tariffs.
Because he joined this on a lark, if I recall. There was a small pay bump for walking around with a armband on. So he's like, sure, why not?
Yeah, he figured, supposed to be walking around keeping his eyes open. If he's going to get an extra 50 credits a week to wear this thing and do what he's doing anyway, sure.
He's in security, so why not just be in security? But it's not the kind of security he's used to doing.
No. So we see that level of discomfort, and we also see that one of the people who's in the CNC has been reporting to Mr. Wells. She was too busy to come and report to come to the Night Watch meeting. She was on shift, but she is the one that tells him that they are using anti-Centauri tactics, which upsets Mr. Lance, and it's in that argument that we find out that they're signing the non-aggression treaty. And then later on, it's strongly implied that she's the one that tips Mr. Wells off that this Narn battlecruiser has sanctuary.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when things really blow up, when Londo finds out about that, and a Centauri warcruiser comes to attack. The station keeps its promise to protect that Narn warcruiser for as long as it's in Babylon 5 space, and in the course of doing so, they destroy that Centauri cruiser. Sheridan is then told in no uncertain terms, apologize or lose your job.
And it's important to note that the Centauri cruiser was the aggressor in that. Babylon 5 only blew them up because they were being fired upon and their people were being fired upon. And so it wasn't just defending the Narn cruiser, it was a matter of defending their own lives as well.
Yes, it was an act of self-defense on the part of Earth Force, defending themselves and the Narn. But it did result in the destruction of the cruiser, and the Centauri acknowledged that their cruiser fire first, which is why the apology would have been considered sufficient with the new peace treaty in place. And Sheridan, presumes the apology has already been written, and they say, no, it's the sentiment that counts. You're free to phrase it any way you want. And he rehearses a very non-apology, but one that will probably put a smile on the viewers' faces as he's going, I'm sorry I waited so long to defend the station, and I'm sorry I waited so long to blow you guys straight to hell. Right? I'm sorry that you decided to attack a station that had 250,000 civilians, including your own people. This is the kind of apology he rehearses. And it's clearly the apology he believes in. A side note, as far as JMS is concerned, that's the apology that Sheridan was going to give.
It's author intent accepted. It's also kind of open to interpretation that perhaps he's getting this off of his chest before being forced to do something that he really doesn't want to do. I think it's unclear in the way that it's done if he's committing to this apology or if he's just saying this stuff because he feels the need to say it, even if he's not going to be allowed to say it in a few minutes. I wasn't sure at the time viewing this what he was going to actually say when he got in front of the people.
Yeah, peeling the curtain back a little bit, this is the second time we've sat down to record this episode coverage, because the first time we had technical issues. And I've rewatched the episode since with that comment in mind. So most of what you hear from this point on will be fresh, because this is about as far as we got the first time before we gave up because of static and whatnot. But I have a new microphone. It seems to be working much better.
Yes, I can hear you. Your voice is very lovely.
So with your comments in mind, rewatching it today, yeah, I think, and reading the comments, I think JMS intended this to be the apology that Sheridan gave. I don't know that Bruce Boxleitner understood or agreed with that, so I don't know that he played it that way.
Yeah.
Like you said, I think he's playing it like, well, let's just vent, and then he'll come up with something else.
Right. And even if he intended to have it come off the other way, I feel like the scene leaves it unclear that he's committing. It's possible that he was, it's possible that he wasn't. I still wasn't sure what was going to happen. I wanted him to say this to their faces.
Yes.
I really, really wanted him to say this to their faces. I just wasn't sure that's what he was going to do. But it becomes a moot point pretty quickly.
Yeah, it does. So in case people who haven't watched the episode for some reason are wondering why we're talking about the apology he would have given, that's because on his way to give that apology in the garden area, which would be, or the Zen garden, very public. That means it's also accessible by the public, and a bomb was placed on the shuttle that was bringing him there. And that's that internal, more like a subway car thing that hangs on the ceiling. And he notices it early enough to call for an emergency override through his link and jump out the doors, and it blows up behind him. Now, on his way down, he is heading towards a surface that's rotating at 60 miles an hour. So, checking the math on this, starting from someplace that's relatively stationary and heading out there, yeah, he would have been pretty much in free fall at first. As he got closer to it, the Coriolis forces would have started to take more effect. And because the air closer to the surface is moving faster than the air outside, there would have been a low pressure area. So there would have been a little bit of air pressure driving him to that surface. In any event, he was not going to survive. Even without that, right, how well would you do if you walk into the side of a train that's moving 60 miles an hour? That's essentially the situation he would have been in. Ivanova calls to scramble jetpacks to come save him. They take 2 minutes to take effect, and they've got 30 seconds. So Delenn tells Kosh, after pulling him someplace private, if you're going to do something, you do it now. So Kosh leaves his encounter suit and flies up to rescue Sheridan.
Because Kosh can fly.
Yes. In doing so, he reveals himself to all. And what they all see is some sort of religious messiah that is specific to them. So if 8 different people from 8 different species are looking at him at the same time, they see 8 different religious messiahs. Or in the case of the humans, it seems to be more of a generic angel. And the pop culture angels, where it's, attractive person, wings, sort of the white glow, no halo. Not exactly some of the actual biblical monstrosities that are angels.
He had a glow about him, which I think is what the Renaissance halos were supposed to represent, was a glow. And so, but yeah, it's generic angel. When people started mentioning specific figures in their cultural mythology, I was a little bit surprised, because that's not exactly what we saw, unless he was supposed to be a specific angel, like, Michael the Archangel or something, but that wasn't communicated.
Yeah, none of the humans recognized him as a specific angel. If they did, they didn't name him. The one person who didn't see anything, apparently, as confirmed by dialogue later, was Londo. He saw nothing. But Kosh brings Sheridan safely down and lands him where no others can see before Kosh slips back to his encounter suit. At least that's what we found out afterward, is where he goes. He just kind of disappears and isn't seen again for the rest of the episode, but apparently he would have been exhausted after maintaining all those different illusory forms. So Sheridan is safe because it was a Centauri who tried to kill him. That's what we see, as a Centauri who planted the bomb. Then there's no longer a need for an apology. And Sheridan has a final meeting with Delenn, where they agree that, okay, Kosh has revealed himself, so the Shadows are going to find out about this, but as long as they don't think anyone else knows, we still have time to prepare. And Kefir is out. His ship detects that neutrino signal he was looking for. He goes to investigate and disappears in a white flash after having the records attached to a homing beacon and ejected from his vessel. That makes its way back to ISN, so the episode closes with ISN reporters offering voiceover of the Shadow vessel, saying that Earth Force has promised to look into it and try to identify who this new alien race is.
Yeah, the need for the Shadows to not yet be aware that we're onto them is reiterated several times in the episode to make sure that you know that that's a big thing. So that whenever this happens as the dramatic final shot of the episode, I think it was the final shot.
Yep.
The import is not lost.
Yes. So I think that's all the main points. There is a small scene early on with Veer and Lanier sitting side by side, just kind of thinking out loud about how the ambassador has changed, using terms that could describe either ambassador.
That was a very clever scene, because each one is talking about their own ambassador, but it sounds like they're talking about the other. Like the words they choose are even more applicable to the other ambassador than they are to their own.
Yeah, it's a delightful 30 or 40 seconds that ends with them standing up going, same time tomorrow, sure, and walking away. And that's pretty much their entire role for the episode.
But they're in the season finale, so that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is so much in this episode, and the stuff we've already talked about is really just like, guest characters, roles, and clear, plot points and stuff. We haven't really, gotten to any deep conversation yet. But wow. The, I guess the Night Watch comes to mind first, because that one character, is it Mr. Wells?
Yep.
Yeah, Mr. Wells. Mr. Wells, the Night Watch has kind of been this background element that I haven't really felt was presented as significant. I know it's Babylon 5, so everything is significant to one degree or another. And, just from things that were said, I knew it would become important eventually. But just the way that it manifests here as basically fascism tool, for controlling and reporting on people. It feels very, very World War II or Red Scare communism kind of thing. Tell on your neighbors because you don't know whom you can trust. Let the government decide that for you.
Mm-hmm.
Surprising and gross.
Yeah, it's really well done where you kind of know that was going on and probably wasn't a good thing because you've got the idea that the whole direction of the Earth government is not a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
But this eliminates ambiguity for anyone who hears subtext below the text.
The fact that the Earth government has been shifting it's also one of those things that's been presented as a background plot element. And you don't realize how significant that's going to become until all of a sudden it's right here in our face. Because while we've been rooting for the Earth to come in on the side of the Narn, in hindsight, it seems very obvious that was never going to happen because of the way that the Earth has been shaping up over the last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely heading in directions. And there's even another little subtlety when Wells and Ivanova are having a conversation, and Ivanova says, "Does Mr. Lance know you're having this conversation?" And he essentially says, "No, separate departments, separate missions. I'm just along for the ride, doing something else."
Mm.
So this is very much a case where the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing.
Because the left hand is kind of nefarious.
Yeah.
Sinister, even, for a obscure linguistic pun.
Right down to the end of the episode where someone from Earth Force told ISN, "We don't know who this race is, but we'll get back to you." Whereas those of us who have been, if you're on your second time through the series, you know it. If you've been reading the novels and comics as we did, we learned from the comics, humans have seen the Shadow forces before, or at least the Psi Corps has, because the Psi Corps were there on Mars when they pulled one out of the sand. So now the question is, that person from Earth Force who made the statement, were they being truthful in that they didn't know and had no record of it, or were they hiding something? Because it could entirely be that, again, movements within movements, and maybe...
And depending upon who exactly they were talking to, the answer could go either way, and we don't know.
Yeah. Yes, so the person they spoke to might have had no clue, whereas others in the government knew exactly what was going on. We don't know that yet.
It's interesting because this is X-Files era of television. not trusting the government is a very in vogue theme on television. And yet this seems to take what is an in vogue 1990s theme and spin it in a very 2016 plus kind of direction,
Yeah.
Because the reasons for not trusting your government in this are much more along the lines of cultural difficulties we've been having in our modern world than it is, the way things were in 1995.
Yeah, there's definitely things coming out. So
trying to think of character arcs because there's so many different things here. Sheridan is one of the main drivers in this, but I don't know. I just keep thinking about like the Narn wanting their, support, and Earth. The old man, what's his name? Lance. He has the conversation with Ivanova before her conversation with Wells. The tones are so different because he comes across as, like you said, a grandfatherly kind of character who has lost people in war and who is tired of loss and just wants to live in peace with his family, grandchildren, all that stuff. And then he chooses to ally himself with the Centauri, who are harsh aggressors, but through probably a lot of political rhetoric on Earth that we're not directly privy to, people have been given a narrative that is not supporting that puts the Centauri in a very nice light, which is probably why this man wants to ally Earth with them.
Yeah, he definitely does not see the Centauri the same way as the station crew do. And he flat out says that at the end, when Sheridan's saying, you cannot reason with these people. If I had done what you say and notified you guys immediately that the Narn cruiser was here, the Centauri wouldn't have negotiated to take the cruiser and leave the crew here with Sanctuary. They'd have done the same thing, but sooner. And Lance is the one saying, oh no, we find that they are quite reasonable and open to negotiation. That's been his experience. So he has a different perspective because his interactions have been different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so he comes across as a very well-intentioned person who is operating from an extremely different perspective than any of our protagonists. And just the idea that truth can be shaped as a narrative is such a theme of our own current politics and everything. It's not hard to understand at all. I think I might actually have a harder time understanding it as a 1995 viewer than I do now.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see what happens if the proposed Babylon 5 reboot gets off the ground, knowing that JMS wanted an ISN reporter on the station in season 2 for this version.
Mm-hmm.
I see that happening because as a former journalist, I am following him on Twitter and knowing what his attitudes are. I think he would have a whole lot to say about journalism today versus then.
Right.
There are more similarities than we realize. It's just that some of the things that they were doing covertly, they're now doing overtly.
Yeah.
So
I feel like we've barely touched the episode. So let's bounce to Kosh. So Kosh had made himself visible. We, for the first time, are given this view of Kosh. Now, you mentioned he would be exhausted from creating all of the illusions.
Mm-hmm.
So that was not... I realized that everybody saw him differently, but that was not a result of passive effects of his existence. That was a deliberate choice from him to have them all see him differently like that.
Yeah, I don't know if it's conscious or if it's somehow built in and automated, but JMS says that, appearing for Lita would not have been as exhausting as this because he only had to maintain that one image rather than one for each species that we're looking at him. Or possibly one for each individual. It was just a lot more draining. So we don't know as much about the Vorlons now as we will. And I don't know if this exact mechanism gets explained. I don't think it does.
Okay.
I've read far enough into season 5. In the script books, I can't think of any moments or instances where that would have been relevant. and it would still be a worthwhile topic of conversation.
So without his intentional presentation or unintentional presentation, if somebody just happens upon him, let's say in an unconscious state because he's been poisoned by a station intruder, and somebody just opens his suit without his permission, would they see something different?
Yes, the doctor in the gathering that you are obliquely referring to saw an angel in that suit.
Okay. He seemed to have a negative reaction to that.
Yeah, and I think it could have been because of what Sheridan was alluding to, where he's saying, okay, so they've been visiting us for years, they've been manipulating us, preparing us so that we'd react a certain way when we see them. That could have been the thoughts going through it. So, and again, part of that is that the actor, when they were filming that scene, neither the actor nor the director knew the secret of what that reveal would be.
Okay.
So they may not have played it as JMS intended. Exactly. He says that, I think the dialogue was just that when you see things, sometimes they change you. And I remember in the gathering, although I couldn't bring it up then, knowing the secret of what was going to be revealed, the way I read those words on the page didn't mesh with how they were delivered.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I think it's a case of the performance being impacted by the fact that some secrets were unrevealed to the people performing and directing.
Okay, that makes sense. I visualize him saying the word horrible, but it may have been in a different light that I'm not specifically remembering now. But anyways, okay, so we finally have an inkling of what a Vorlon is, and the fact that they've been influencing Earth and cultural myths of lots of different planets for a long time is startling. But they are very, very old. We've already established that. The Vorlon are very, very, very old.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about Kefir, since we're never going to talk about Kefir again.
Yes. Yeah, unless he shows up in some flashback in a comic or novel at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Which is possible. I have started reading... Oh, actually, it's guaranteed.
So he does show up in book 3?
Yeah, minor spoiler. I've only read the first chapter of book 3, but he's in it.
Okay. I'll be starting that soon. Okay. So it's funny because you mentioned whenever he came in, we're going to find out exactly how JMS handles characters that he's forced to bring into the show. He has been a very minor character. He's hardly done anything. And yet, even with JMS not wanting to use him, he still has had a background role to play that has shaped the storyline, which I find interesting.
Yeah, he didn't give him much, but he gave him something very, very important. Right? He's been on screen 6 times. Once he was it was in a Larry to Tell You episode, and he was being annoyed by the roommates he was forced to have. Once his entire appearance was being out in space to identify the teddy bear that's floating. Yeah, these are the level of his appearances. The ones that mattered were in the early season where his wingman got destroyed by the shadow when he saw him, later on when he was told, stop hunting for this thing, and then now. So that's been his character arc. He is Captain Ahab, and that shadow vessel was his white whale. He had to prove it existed and find out what it was.
Which, is a simple concept, but it does help inform the story because it's his insistence on finding it that is the dramatic ending to this season. The existence of the shadows that we were trying to keep oh so super secret is now going to get broadcast and investigated by anyone who was interested.
Mm-hmm. At massive personal cost.
Right.
Although the script does just say he disappears in a flash of blinding light, JMS didn't tell the actor, who he had no issues with, that his character was dead until after the wrap party.
Mm-hmm. Didn't want to crush his feelings.
Yeah. He's like, no, he's just a good human being. He was professional. He always showed up knowing his lines. He was ready to work. He just didn't have a part to play in the bigger story.
Right.
So
it's not his fault that he was a non-entity.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember if this is the episode with Londo and Sheridan confronts Londo and we see a brief moment of Londo not wanting to do what he's going to have to do. I think that was the last episode. I don't think that was this episode.
I think it might have been both, because there was a moment in this one where Sheridan basically calls him saying, no, you are not creating stability, you are eroding stability. And you can see a look that Peter Jurasik gives. He turns his head away from Sheridan and has a look, and then he changes his appearance and turns back, where it basically shows that Londo knows Sheridan is right, but he's not backing down because he has goals that he considers more important.
Right. And a job to do.
Yeah, so we do have that scene. We also have the scene where Londo admits he saw nothing, which was another good moment for Londo.
So is that from a lack of belief on Londo's part, or a lack of cultural myths on the part of the Centauri?
Well, we know the Centauri are polytheists, because they were running through some of the gods in season 1 when Londo got drunk at the party. Now, we also know there was another sentient species that the Centauri wiped out. So, though it's possible that Londo does not personally believe, it is possible that he saw nothing because the Vorlons chose the wrong sentient species to program. So those specific myths that they'd respond to would have been the species that the Centauri wiped out. It's possible the Vorlons did not visit. We don't have an answer to any of those possibilities just yet.
But regardless of the factual reason why he didn't see anything, the emotion of the moment at the time is because Londo has fallen.
Yeah, he's passed so many points of no return now.
Mm-hmm.
So this train has very much left the station. And I think the fact that the Centauri tried to kill Sheridan, who Londo, I believe, respects.
Right.
This is part of it, although, that whole giving form to the dream thing is starting to leak into our other conversations here. Because we do have a few more moments as we're talking about it. This is another one of those episodes that does not waste a frame.
Right.
So we could give a 44-minute summary of a 44-minute episode and still feel like we're leaving out important things.
The episode overall was, I think, both more and less than I was expecting. I think I was expecting something, I don't know, more, I don't know, because, the feeling you get when you come out of Best of Both Worlds, there are earth-shattering events, and yet the Best of Both Worlds cliffhanger that feels so irreversible and traumatic is resolved in 45 minutes in the next episode. But I didn't have, coming out of this, that feeling of traumatic, earth-shattering tension. So in that way, it's a little bit less than I was expecting. And yet it was more because this world is changing in ways that I had no expectation of happening. So much of this show is just stuff that I had no expectation of happening. And, with the Night Watch becoming a problem and the Earth siding with the Centauri and Babylon 5 being forced into a position that feels untenable going forward. Because that's something we could talk about is, okay, sure, Sheridan was forced to apologize. He never got the moment to apologize. But what is Babylon 5 going to do now in the wake of these policies from EarthGov and EarthForce? What are they going to do now they're being told, be friendly to the Centauri? And none of them want to be friendly to the Centauri.
Especially in light of the closing narration we got from Ivanova, where she spells out, Babylon 5 was supposed to be our last best hope for peace. By the end of 2259, we knew it had failed.
Right.
And it had become our best hope for victory.
And the opening narration for season 2 foreshadows that closing speech, because this says this is our last great hope for peace, but the year is 2259, the year the Great War came upon us all. So Babylon 5 was a hope for peace, and yet the war is coming. So we knew this failure was happening at some point along the way. Now, I will admit that I had been a little bit confused by a comment made in an earlier episode, because the Narn Centauri conflict is not the Great War. The Great War, however, does still involve the Centauri being aggressors, just on a larger scale. And the Great War that we're talking about in this episode might not even be the huge conflict of light and darkness that we've been forecasting as the much larger concern. But yeah, there's just so much going on.
It is. One of the things I love about the show is that it constantly surprises you on the first time through, even though everything is foreshadowed.
Mm-hmm.
So you see all the pieces on the chessboard, but it's like you're expecting checkers, and all of a sudden this thing isn't just moving diagonally, it's taking 2 steps forward and 1 to the side.
Right.
Yeah, so everything is set up and it still catches you off guard, which is really hard to do from a writing perspective.
Yes. You know, I really don't like the accusation of lazy writing whenever a narrative direction is just something that you're not enjoying. The fact that you don't enjoy it does not mean the writers were lazy. They were trying to tell what they thought was a good story, and it's just not registering with you. That's fine. However, on the converse, really, really strong writing like this has to be given credit, because the complexity of putting your pieces in order and telling a story in a way that is both, you know, like you said, both going to foreshadow all of the events and yet also successfully catch the viewer off guard, that is difficult. And it should be praised when it happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, JMS said that he viewed each season as a funnel. So you start with multiple plot threads that have their own space and their own room to move. But by the time that series is done, you got to be pulling them all together and squeezing them through all in the same space at the same time.
You know, this show is one of those shows that the first season, I think, works against it as a overall work that somebody unfamiliar might try to experience for the first time. Because the Babylon 5 that we're watching now and the Babylon 5 that we were watching a year ago feel like such different animals in storytelling, in directing, in acting, in world building. They just feel like such different creations. And, you know, in the light of us getting ready to start releasing episodes as we're recording this now, our promo has just gone up and the first episode goes live, you know, in a couple of weeks. I hope that whoever is trying this show out for the first time along with this podcast a year ago has stuck with it this long, because man, it's worth putting up with season 1 to get into all of the developments of the later episodes. Not to say that season 1 was bad, there's just a lot.
Cue a Bachman Turner Overdrive guitar riff right now. Baby, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Yeah. I'm sure there's more to be said about this episode. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but eager to see what's going to happen next week in season 3.
Yeah. Oh, I think
because
it's 5
that's
days.
The way things are.
Yeah. A couple other comments. We do know what's happening near the end of the year. They actually say that the new year is less than a week away.
Oh yeah, I meant to mention that, because the fact that they mention the year number in the opening credits and it changes at the season strongly implies that every season ends around the end of the calendar year. And they didn't mention that at all at the end of season 1, but it's very much a part of the dialogue in this episode.
Yes, and as Yvonne was giving her closing narration on something that should be no later than December 24th, because the New Year's a week away, she is lighting her menorah. Mm-hmm. So I reached out to a colleague who is a practicing Jew at the school where I teach, and asked him what's the appropriate date to light the menorah in 2259. And he says that in the Hebrew calendar, Hanukkah always begins on the 25th of the month of Kislev, which he believes would be Sunday, December 11th in 2259.
Yeah.
And then the conversation continues with him going, and why are you asking, by the way?
In the year 2259. Jewish holidays follow a lunar calendar, and so how their dates line up with our dates shifts from year to year. But Hanukkah does almost always land before Christmas on the two calendars. So I did think about the fact that she was lighting her menorah, and it felt a little bit late to be doing that. But, you know, in the interest of telling the story and representing that side of her culture, I think it's easy to forgive.
Yeah, especially since what's going on, it's entirely possible to legitimately say, I was too busy for that particular ceremony.
Yes, I forgot to Hanukkah.
Yeah, we also know that she is not strictly adherent to the customs, given how long it took her to sit Shiva for her father.
Right.
So, yeah, so she was a little bit late in lighting the menorah, but it got lit. So I'm hoping that matters more than missing it completely.
Right.
Because I know, well, my wife is Vietnamese, and so they do their traditional Tet, or their New Year, is also a lunar calendar, and we're recording this in a leap year, and their leap years are not as frequent as those in the calendars that we're used to.
Uh-huh.
But that's because they don't add a day, they add a month. So this year had 2 Octobers.
Same for the Jewish calendar. The lunar leap years add a 13th month to the calendar.
Yeah.
Which I found fascinating as a child when I was learning about all the differences.
So, shall we dig into our last best hopes? What was the standout character or character moment?
Oh, man. There are so many to choose from. They're just popping into my head. But the first one that popped into my head when you said that feels small, but also feels really big. And that is when Zach Allen sees the friendly store shop owner being carried away and his shop closed because he's under suspicions. And earlier in the episode, Wells had said, we already know this is happening. Can you just confirm it for us? Just, add your testimony. And when I first watched the episode, I wasn't sure exactly how the fact that Zach Allen was adding his testimony was going to play out. And honestly, the rest of the events of the episode, including him being hauled off, would probably have happened without Zach Allen adding his testimony. But now we have a personal guilt and a personal complicity being added into the mix on the part of Allen. He, in a small, unimportant way, but still there, he helped make this happen. And he helped establish fascism on Babylon 5. And watching that happen, I was just like, wow, what is this going to mean? Where is this going to go? So Zach Allen is possibly never going to get Last Best Hope again because he's such a minor character, but he got it today for me.
Okay, that's fair. And he was a nice choice because when they introduced the Night Watch, that was the same episode or close to it. It was when Sheridan, I think in the scene where they did the infrared view and Sheridan saw the shadows around Mr. Morden earlier this season, we hear Alan say that he didn't really study history that hard and wasn't super interested in it. So we can see why he's missing the warning signs that the audience is catching.
Yeah.
In my case, I'm actually going to pick a scene we've talked about, which was not in the original script because the episode was running short. So they needed to add 3 minutes somehow. And that is the scene where Mr. Wells comes to draft Ivanova. And she tells him that, no, she got as far as she did with loyalty to her friends, loyalty to her colleagues, loyalty to Earth and to Earth Force. And what Night Watch is doing violates every single one of those. She will have no part of it. And yeah, it might take her longer to get her own command without their help, but that's the way she's going to do it. So I'd love her recognizing what Night Watch is and saying, go away. I would prefer it if you never come back.
What I love about that scene is I don't honestly know if she knew when Wells came in that Wells was associated with the Night Watch. Since she's been keeping tabs on it, maybe she did. But it doesn't really matter for the scene. She is completely cordial, completely polite, not even icy polite. She's warm. She's welcoming. And then he brings up the Night Watch, and Ivanova's demeanor toward him shifts on a dime. And it's completely professional and completely driven by the fact that it is the Night Watch that she is rejecting and Wells as a part of that. And it's just, yeah, the way that scene plays out, I thought was fantastic.
Yeah. As you said, there's sometimes when we watch these episodes, there's a very clear last best hope. Sometimes there's candidates every 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is one of those every 2 minute contenders.
But yes, as far as season finales go, this was pretty great. I'm sure it's not going to be as big as some others later down the road. We'll find out when we get there. But I really enjoyed this.
Oh, yes. Yeah, we've got some big things coming, including the season 3 premiere in 5 days.
Dun dun dun.
Yes, but we'll talk more about Matters of Honor after we give form to the dream, which I almost forgot. It's kind of a big part of it.
Yes.
So, in this case, we've got a lot of obvious things. Clearly, the fact that the Shadows are public is going to matter. The fact that Earth signed a non-aggression treaty with the Centauri is going to matter. We didn't even mention that part of Ivanova's closing narration was that the Centauri are continuing to expand more aggressively just away from Earth, now that they know that Earth is not going to get involved.
Right. So that's what I said. That's what I meant earlier about the Great War going from a Centauri-Narn conflict to a larger Centauri conflict against, a lot of people.
Oh, yes. We also have the reveal of Kosh. We have Sheridan saying, okay, if this is what the Vorlons really look like, what is their part in human history and human evolution? How much have they manipulated the direction of our species? We have a scene where Sheridan and Ivanova talk about how much that uniform meant to them when they first wore it. Mm-hmm. And doesn't mean that much now. We have Ivanova giving Sheridan a Christmas/Hanukkah gift that is a piece of the Black Star, the one person who's ever managed to win against a Minbari cruiser for Earth Force. Here's a piece of that to say, hey, the impossible is possible. You've done it before. So we have Veer and Lanier right there. They've shared that scene. So we know that Veer has major concerns about where things are going, that he's willing to discuss, at least on some level, with other races.
That was the first time I think we've ever seen Veer and Lanier interact directly. So it established a connection between those two that we hadn't seen before.
Yeah. We have G'Kar sneaking into the Zen Garden, offering to speak on Sheridan's behalf because he still has friends in the League of Non-Aligned Worlds and friends on that council. And Ivanova saying, this is not a good time for it. Not, you're wrong, but yeah, not now. Right, so G'Kar is not willing to become a spectator. So we have a lot going on here. I'm hoping that I caught it all, but even now I'm not convinced I have, because there's just so much. And you might have noticed that when things come back, they will often mention that, yes, this was foreshadowed. Like Sheridan explicitly says, this is what Kosh meant when he said he'd be recognized by everybody if he left his encounter suit. So that part is now understood. So, yes, this is what we have for the Fall of Night. Keeping in mind, that is actually one other piece, I guess, for giving form to the dream. Night is when the part of the Earth that we're on is in the Earth's shadow.
So without using the word shadows again, like they did 2 or 3 times this season, we have once again said the fall of shadow.
Yes. All right. So do we have anything else to say before we invite people to come back in 5 days for Matters of Honor?
I can't think of anything. 5 days. And we said it before, but the broadcast date shifted 30 years ago. So our release date is shifting now. And it's going to shift again slightly. No, never mind. Because our leap day is coming up in 2 months, but recording a release leap day is not coming up in 2 months. So never mind.
Yes, this is a case where, because we're trying to keep it 30 years for some reason, 1996 and 2024 when we're recording. But yes, as we release them in 1996, we will shift a weekday because 1996 was a leap year. But that's not coming until season 3, episode 10, which is after a bit of a break anyway.
Okay.
So yes, 1996 was a leap year. So when we move from season 2 to season 3, we're going to jump from Saturdays to Thursdays. And then in April, when we come back after a break, we will shift to Wednesdays. Now, speaking of breaks, we do have a break coming up in 4 weeks, and we like to fill these breaks with content so that when the show takes 6 months off, we never take more than 3 weeks off at a time. This includes feedback episodes.
Dun dun dun.
So, feedback can be sent in a variety of ways. The recommended ways are email. So you can email Babylon5 30 years later at gmail.com.
Another recommended way is to leave comments on our websites. The episodes are posted 2 places, one of which is johnreadscomics.com, which is where all of my podcasts are hosted, including Ninjas and Bots and Say the Magic Word, my Shazam podcast that I just started that might still be going whenever this comes out, and other things.
You can also leave comments on Bureau42.com, which hosts all of my podcasts.
And you should leave us reviews on the podcatcher of your choice. Apple Podcasts is the most popular one, and so we check that one regularly as a matter of course. If you leave a review on another podcatcher, we thank you for it and would love to read it on the air. We just need to know that it's there. So drop us a line somehow, some way, through one of the other means to say, hey, I left a review over on Podomatic or whatever it is, and we will go and read it and thank you for it here.
And then the final way is to post comments on our automatically cross-posted YouTube posts. So our host service should automatically post all of our episodes over to our YouTube channel, and you can leave comments there.
So yes, 5 days until season 3 starts. That's exciting.
Yes. All right. So, in the meantime, thank you for listening.
And good eating to you.